I feel like every time I do a video, there's external noise that I'm trying to block out. So yeah, thankfully we have the tiny mic. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you're a regular viewer. My name's Robin from This Blog's Neat, and today we're going to talk about rum. And we're not only going to talk about it, but I'm also going to taste through 6 different rums, all from the Transcontinental Rum Line, bottled by Vellier. And you obviously know this because you clicked on the thumbnail for this video. But first, I want to talk about kind of the rum basics. I've done a video on whiskey basics, but I haven't done any on rum basics, which I think is funny because I end up diving into a lot more detail when it comes to rum. We kind of nerd out a lot more, but I haven't, talked about the kind of basics of rum. And I wanted to talk about that because I think it is really important. Rum is kind of a misunderstood category, and it shouldn't be. I think we can blame kind of the lack of US regulations for different categories of rum on that. But I mean, also like marketing and stuff, we can also put some blame there. But I'm here to kind of shed some light on the different styles of rum and what you should look for. So this intro, the first part of this video is more so for those of you who don't know the different styles of rum that are available all around the world, and that we get in the US. And for those just kind of looking to categorize rums in your own mind, or figure out a way to kind of think about rums and think about different rum categories, which that could also be for someone who is a rum fan. But I feel like this is more targeted at those who haven't really done that research themselves and are looking to learn more about rum. But if you are just here to see what I thought of the entire Transcontinental Rum Line, then I've got Future Robin has put the timestamp down below, and just click and you can skip through this first part. But it is a very important first part. A lot of people don't realize that the difference, like what makes rum versus whiskey, brandy, mezcal, tequila, agave spirits, that whole thing, is the raw ingredients that are used. So in order for a spirit to be a rum, it must be made from sugarcane juice, syrup, molasses, other byproducts. Sometimes in the US, you'll see this often too. Sometimes rums are even made from crystallized sugar of varying degrees. But for the most part, we're not going to really talk about those types of rums. We're going to talk about the styles that you'll come across much more often. And when I am looking for rums, I'm browsing the liquor store, or I'm thinking about new rums to pick up, I have 4 questions. I have 4 questions that I ask about those rums in order to understand what that rum is going to taste like. And before I tell you these 4 questions, the reason I have these in mind, and the way I'm going to kind of break down the different categories of rum, are because that the current system that we use is terrible. Considering rums white, gold, and dark is absolutely terrible and does not indicate what those rums actually taste like. This is like, I don't know, grouping whiskeys by like gold and dark. We would have things like corn whiskey, Japanese whiskey, Scotch, Irish whiskey, all grouped into one section of the liquor store. And then all the dark spirits or dark whiskeys, so bourbon, rye, mostly American whiskeys, possibly even Australian whiskey. Maybe we'll toss in some like really, really, really old sherried Scotch right? All in the same category, and it just doesn't make sense. So anyways, classifying rums as white, gold, and dark, or silver and black and stuff is just terrible. So I have my own way, like I said, of kind of categorizing the rums in my head. And the 4 questions that I ask, well, first of all, I make sure, this is not one of the questions. First of all, I make sure that the rum has no additives. And if it doesn't have additives, you will be able to tell on the bottle. It'll say something about no additives, but making sure there's no additives. This can be coloring, this can be sugar, flavoring. Like, I don't want any of that. So that's kind of my first criteria of rums that I'll consider. Then I ask my 4 questions. First question is, what are the raw ingredients? Most often you'll see molasses or fresh pressed sugarcane juice. Less commonly, you'll see sugarcane syrup, but all of this is going to give me ideas of how the flavor profile might be. For example, rums made from fresh pressed sugarcane juice tend to be much more grassy and vegetal, whereas rums made from molasses tend to be more robust and grungy. And rums made from sugarcane syrup kind of, for me, like live somewhere in between a molasses and a cane juice rum. They'll tend to be sweet, grassy, and also have a little bit of grunginess to them. So that's the first thing that I look for. Second thing is, how was it fermented? And this might not always be apparent, but I like to understand if it was a short duration fermentation, a long duration fermentation, or spontaneously fermented. That is also going to greatly impact the flavors. And this is probably not going to be apparent on the bottle. However, maybe with some Googling, you could find it out. Typically, if a rum distillery uses longer fermentations and spontaneous fermentations, they advertise that. Now, short duration fermentations are going to give the rum a lot more flavors that are coming from the raw ingredients, right? So let's say like less than a week, you're going to get more of the flavors coming from the raw ingredients. Whereas anything more than that can be considered a long duration fermentation. Sometimes they're super duper long and they're several weeks. And this allows a lot more flavor development from the microbes that are present in the fermentation. So you'll get a lot more fruity notes, floral notes. If you want to learn more about esters, I've got videos about that. And then we have spontaneous fermentation, which most of the time is paired with long duration fermentations. And again, a spontaneous fermentation is going to introduce a lot more diversity of microbes, and that will also build up those fruity and floral flavors. It'll build up that funkiness, more diversity of flavors. The third thing I'll ask, how is it distilled? So here you'll normally find pot distilled or column distilled. Now, some rums are a blend of pot and column, but if you know that, then you can kind of guess what, it's going to taste like in the middle of a pot and column distilled rum, if that makes sense. So column distilled rums will be a lot lighter, a lot more refined, whereas pot distilled rums will be a lot more robust and flavorful. Pot distillation preserves a lot more of the flavors from fermentation. Again, pot distilled is normally paired with longer duration fermentations and spontaneous fermentations to really preserve all those crazy big flavors that are produced. Whereas column distillation, again, refines, it removes a lot of those flavors, and you'll get a much cleaner rum that way. So question number 4, how was it aged? There are 3 options here. We have unaged, we have aged, and we have aged and filtered. Unaged is pretty straightforward. It never sees a barrel. Aged is also pretty straightforward. This is where the rum will sit in usually an oak cask for some duration of time. Often they're used barrels in the rum industry, so you'll see a lot of ex-bourbon barrels, which similar to like in Scotch and in Irish whiskey will bring out a lot more of those like honey and vanilla notes. Sherry casks are also used, and those will bring out more like nutty, dried fruit, spicy notes. And French oak as well, which usually some sherry casks are some form of European oak, which tends to be spicier than American oak. But yeah, you'll get fruits and spices. Now, the third option, aged and filtered, you tend to see white rums that have an age statement on them, right? This is why we can't classify them as white, gold, dark. They've been aged, but then they've been run through a charcoal filtration system that pulls out all of the color, some of the flavor as well, but it tends to give the rum more of these kind of vanilla notes, right? And some examples of this are like Bacardi Superior, El Dorado 3-year, the Flor de Caña 4-year. Those are ones that you've probably come across, but these have been aged and filtered. So whenever I look at a rum, I promise you, I am looking at all 4 of these things to help me understand what the flavor profile of that rum is going to be. Now, each country defines and regulates rum differently. Okay, so there are a few common styles that you'll see out there. We'll start with kind of the molasses, since we were just talking about Cuban rum. The molasses-based, column distilled, aged, and charcoal filtered rums. Those are much more light and refined, and you'll typically see those from Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic. Then there's another style that's usually molasses based, and it's a blend of pot and column distillate that hasn't been charcoal filtered if it is aged. Those tend to be a lot more robust and flavorful, and you'll see those rums coming out of countries like Barbados, Jamaica, Guyana. And then we have like the fresh pressed sugarcane juice rums that are column distilled. This is normally referred to as rum agricole, but this tends to be a lot more grassy and vegetal, and some countries that you'll see these come out of are Martinique and Guadeloupe. So again, just as a quick recap, and as I taste through the Transcontinental Rum Line, all 6 of these rums, I'm going to kind of try to answer the questions that I have here. But anytime I look at a rum, I make sure, first and foremost, like question 0, are there any additives? If yes, I move on. If no, then I continue for my 4 questions. What are the raw ingredients? How is it fermented? How is it distilled? And how is it aged? That's it. Okay, so now that we understand the different ways of making rum, I am going to taste through 6 different expressions from the core range of the Transcontinental Rum Line, which, as I said, is bottled by Vellier, and you guys know how much I love Vellier. Vellier does bottle everything with no additives at all, and they make it very known, put it on their bottles, put it on their website. Transparency is something that they believe very deeply in, and as do I, so hence why I love them so much. But the purpose of their Transcontinental Rum Line of releasing these is kind of what I was talking about today, right? It's showing you the different types of rums that are available around the world. So maybe I'll read the blurb. Transcontinental Rum Line is an invitation to travel in the world of rum, a composition of rum-producing countries from a global perspective. The range is an opportunity to discover iconic styles of various regions and explore the differences in raw material, distillation styles, and aging conditions. Each bottle is carefully selected to showcase its nuance of production and high quality of the resulting spirit. TCRL serves as an excellent education resource to understand the global diversity of rum profiles for both experienced rum lovers and those just embarking on their journey. And it also says, as I already mentioned, TCRL is always bottled free of sugar, coloring, additives. So before I dive in, I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreons. Thank you guys so much for helping to support the channel and for being so supportive over the last few weeks over on Patreon. I really appreciate you guys. And if you, the viewer, would also like to join us over on Patreon, I would be so thankful. But you could also just support the channel by doing the normal YouTube things and liking this video, subscribing, sharing it with your friends, leaving me comments, watching more of my videos. I don't know if there's anything else that you could do. But anyways, without further ado, we are going to start with High Seas, which is the latest release from the Transcontinental Rum Line. This is actually a blended rum that's intended for cocktails, and it is a blend of a 6-year-old tropically aged Panama rum, unaged high ester Jamaican rum, and an unaged Grand Arome rum from Martinique. With that information, let me see if I can answer all 4 of my questions. I think for all of these, I can at least answer 3 of the 4 questions, which is good enough. So first of all, what are the raw ingredients? Molasses. I know that based on the country of origin and the styles of rum that are in this blend. It's going to be a blend of pot and column. I know high ester rums from Jamaica tend to be pot, but I think the rum from Panama and maybe the rum from Martinique might also be pot, but I'm going to assume that they are both column. And how are they aged? Well, we have one that is tropically aged for 6 years and the other 2 that are unaged. So we have a blend of aged and unaged. Right off the bat, I think I'm getting those like more Jamaican high ester notes. So a little bit of this fruitiness, but it's not super overpowering. And now I'm getting some grassiness going along with it. There's some citrus as well, more of like a key lime, somewhere between a lime and a lemon zest. There's also a little earthiness that's, now we're back to the fruits. The earthiness, I was almost getting like a dried mulch thing. Those fruits again are really, really light. Ooh, there's almost like a minty thing too. That fruitiness comes forward a lot more on the palate. It was a lot lighter on the nose, but no, I'm getting fresh fig meets pineapple core. And then there's this kind of like borderline mulchy, but more so like a cinnamon bark thing. A little bit of that citrus on the finish, but now it's more of like a charred lemon. It's more floral on the nose now. The second sip had more spices. I was getting a little bit of star anise and almost like a red hot cinnamon. So like I said, this one is intended for cocktails, and I did put this in a donga punch and it was a very huge hit. Oh, I forgot to say the High Seas is bottled at 45.7% ABV. Okay, so next up we have the Panama 6-year-old. This was distilled in 2015, I believe. I believe that's what the 2015 is about. And it is produced by the Varela Hermanos distillery. I'm sorry for any mispronunciation. Let's see if we can answer the 4 questions here. Again, I think we can answer 3. Raw ingredients, molasses. How is it distilled? Column distilled. And how is it aged? It is aged tropically for 6 years. And this is at 43% ABV. I wonder if this is the 6-year-old Panama that gets mixed into the High Seas. So right off the bat, I'm getting tons of coconut and toffee. There's also a little floral thing in here too, and some citrus. So maybe I'll call it orange blossom. maybe a little orange blossom. But yeah, I'm getting a lot of that like toffee, maybe a little butterscotch as well. It's light. This one's also light on the palate. Also, based on the color here, being aged 6 years tropically, I don't know what kind of casks were used to age it, but my guess would be ex-bourbon ex-bourbon, just by how light it is for 6 years and aged in Panama. So right off the bat, I'm getting that like light toffee, like a light toffee with some dried figs. And then there's a lot more spices that come through. I get a lot of clove on this, a little bit of cinnamon. And the finish is pretty light with like a little bit of some orange oils. When I go back to the nose, I get leather. That's fun. And then some more of that like citrus oil, like maybe some orange oil. Yeah, that's delicious. It's nice and light and has those nice like butterscotch, toffee, spicy notes with very minimal fruits, more so like a dried fruit thing. Okay, next up we have Australia, 7-year-old from 2014. This is from the Binley Distillery, which is the oldest operating distillery in Australia. We're going to be able to answer all of our questions here. So first, raw ingredients, molasses. Second, fermentation style. They let this ferment for several days using their own proprietary yeast strain. How is it distilled? Using a pot still. And how is it aged? It is aged 5 years tropically, so in Australia, in ex-bourbon barrels, and then 2 years in an ex-cognac, I'm gonna mispronounce this, foeder. I think that's how we pronounce it in the US, in France. So aged for an additional 2 years in, foeders are like these huge vats, I believe. So we get to answer all 4 of our questions here. This one is at 47% ABV, so we're slowly creeping up in ABV. And the color here, slightly darker. Ooh, rose. This interestingly has a lot of like very straightforward like oaky notes. So like it almost smells like a really delicious like toasted wood. I'm getting some really good spices. So a lot of cinnamon, but there's also a lot of sweetness in here too. There's fruits, but there's also just like syrupiness, like cherries, like dark cherries in their syrup, and vanilla. This one's smelling like a lot more rich and luxurious. A hint of black licorice in the background. This one has a lot more of this like dark character to it. So I'm getting a lot of those dark dried fruits, but also some coffee. Maybe it's more borderline like leathery. There is some charred orange and charred grapefruit in here. Some like cacao nibs. It has this floral thing too. And a lot of spice. A lot more like cloves, allspice, star anise. Yeah, this is like darker, a little richer. Peppercorns as well, black peppercorns. There's some bitter, almost burnt caramel. I like it. Very different from the other two. Okay, next up we have Mauritius, the 3-year-old, 2017. This is from Gray's Distillery in Mauritius, which apparently is like a huge distillery. Their brand name is New Grove. Mauritius is a little island east of Madagascar. Oh, there's something so familiar in there. Okay. Jared, can you come smell something? Let's answer the 4 questions, or see if we can answer the 4 questions. Raw ingredients, molasses. How is it fermented? I don't really know. Column distilled and aged for 3 years in new American oak. Will you smell this and tell me? There's something familiar in there that I can't put my finger on. Say it into the mic.
There's definitely some pickle juice.
Yes, it is rye bread. Do you get the caraway? Yes, that's what it is. It's rye bread. It's the caraway in rye bread. That's what it is.
So it's not.
No, but I can see how you get pickle juice because it like reminds me of, I don't know, like a pickly rye. Then I'm also getting some caramel, some old wood. Old wood. Like a Dr. Pepper? No, root beer. That's what I'm thinking of, not Dr. Pepper. I haven't had soda in a while. But like maybe like a hippie root beer that's actually made with, well, I don't know. Is root beer actually made with roots nowadays? This is fun. Very different from the others. Oh, and also much darker. So interestingly though, I would expect it to be, for new American oak, I would expect it to almost be darker, but it is only 3 years. And I wonder if it was also a standard barrel size, or if it was a little bit larger or something like that. There's a fruit. Not a pineapple, no, but it is a tropical fruit. But there's a lot of, first of all, this is at 50% ABV and really, really, really low heat. There is a lot of caramel, vanilla, spices as well. So like new American oak. But then there's that fruit. There's so much peppercorn. I just went back to the nose. So much peppercorn. A floral thing that I want to say lilac, but I'm not 100% confident on. That caraway definitely comes forward on the palate. Second sip, a lot more of the spices came forward. I lost that tropical fruit. Yeah, those spices, like the caraway. There's some other kind of like mixed herbs, as well as clove. Yeah, I feel like I'm getting clove across the board. Maybe it's a clove day. Okay, next up we have Barbados 6-year-old from 2015. This is distilled by Foursquare. This is at 55% ABV, and it is from molasses. It is a pot and column blend. It's aged tropically for 5 years in ex-bourbon barrels and then 1 year in France. I don't know what type of barrel. Maybe it's also still stays in the ex-bourbon, but now is moved from Barbados to France. And the color is a little bit lighter than the Mauritius. So yeah, ex-bourbon makes sense for a 6-year-old. This one is like spice meets vanilla meets banana pudding, but like the banana pudding is very, very distant, like a lot more on the spice and the vanilla. There's a creamy thing in here too, like creme brulee. Yeah, nice sweet caramely thing. It smells really nice. This one really coats your palate. It is warm and sweet. It's like caramel and maybe a touch of maple syrup, just like a drop mixed into the caramel, and some really nice warm spices. There's some vanilla, like the vanilla pod, like not fresh vanilla beans. Fresh vanilla beans? Wow. That one is decadent, I would say. There's prunes, like nice syrupy prunes, but honestly the nose is super light. There's a little bit of a floral thing that is almost like potpourri, not potpourri. Yeah, maybe some dark dried cherries as well. Nice. And yeah, just like luxurious, like some milk chocolate in here too. Really, really nice. Wow. I feel like I've said really nice for all of them. Last but not least, we have Jamaica 5-year-old 2016. This comes from Worthy Park, and it is molasses based. It is pot distilled. They have double retort pot stills, and it is aged tropically for 4 years and then for 1 additional year in Europe. Now, based on the light color here, it's like the second lightest. The high C's is the lightest, and then this one's second lightest. So my guess is like very used ex-bourbon casks. It's like grassy red hots. There's this like grassiness, this like crabgrass, like thick, sweet crabgrass along with red hots. I'm getting, more cinnamon and some pineapples and some like stewed apples. Yeah. As far as like high ester Jamaican rums goes, this is not super duper in your face. This is really nice. I'm really enjoying the ester profile. Some fig jam. Yeah, it's really nice. The fig jam comes forward immediately, but then there's also juicy fruit gum. And then it goes into this spice and almost like a charred cinnamon, like almost campfire-y. And then it comes back and does this like almost mint-like kind of vegetal, kind of grassy thing. Yeah, the nose is giving me that like cinnamon pine cone thing from Trader Joe's during the holidays. Maybe a star anise thing in the finish as well, or when it starts to develop more of those spices. The mouthfeel is really nice on this too. It's nice and creamy. It's at 57.18% ABV, and the heat is really not bad at all. I really, really enjoyed all of these, and as you could tell based on my tasting notes, they are all very different from one another. Let's kind of set aside the high C's, right? This one is a blend that is intended for cocktails. The other 5 are so different from one another. The Panama is really light. The Australia was like nice and fruity and floral. The Mauritius had that like caraway spicy thing to it. The Barbados had those really luxurious, rich characteristics. And the Jamaica had that funky fruitiness to it without being too funky, which is there such thing as too funky? But they're all different from one another. And I hope that this kind of demonstrates that the way we classify rums as white, gold, dark is not the best. What's the proper way to classify them? Like, I don't know. Should we be classifying them based on country of origin? Maybe. But what I prefer to do is to understand the production process that's used to make them and how that results in the flavor profiles that you get. Yeah, and I hope my little blurb in the beginning was helpful to kind of help you think about that as well when you're looking at rums or tasting rums. But yeah, with that, I think this video is long enough. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I do talk about rum. I do taste rum. I make rum as well. And I also do that for other spirits, whiskey, a lot of whiskey, brandy, mezcal, etc. I don't make mezcal. Let's be clear there. Let me know if you have any questions at all or need me to clarify anything that I discussed. The sun is hitting me. It's the afternoon. You can tell that time has passed by the change of the lighting in my apartment.